I invited my nature-loving niece, Stye, on a camping trip, but didn't extend the invite to her phone-addicted sister, Ellie. Now my family feels divided, and I'm questioning my decisions. I'm Jake, a 42-year-old uncle to two wonderful nieces, Stye, 14, and Ellie, 11. They're the daughters of my sister Laura, who's 39. I've been a part of their lives since they were born, watching them grow from tiny babies to the spirited girls they are today. Our family has always been close-knit. Laura and I grew up in a small Oregon town where everyone knew each other. Our parents, now retired, still live in the same house we grew up in. After college, both Laura and I moved to Portland, wanting to stay connected to our roots while also experiencing city life. We ended up living just a few blocks apart, which made it easy to stay involved in each other's lives. When Stye was born, I was 28, single, and focused on my software development career. But becoming an uncle changed everything for me. I loved spending time with Stye, reading her stories, taking her to the park, and later teaching her to ride a bike. When Ellie came along 3 years later, my heart only grew bigger. As the girls grew, I embraced my role as the fun uncle. I took them on adventures, taught them silly jokes, and sneaked them extra dessert when their parents weren't looking. My wife, Melissa, whom I met when the girls were 5 and 2, quickly embraced her role as their aunt. A geologist by trade, her passion for rocks and nature sparked a similar interest in both girls. Despite their age difference, Stye and Ellie were always close. They loved the outdoors and often joined Melissa and me on short hikes or weekend camping trips. Stye was the leader, always coming up with creative games and stories, while Ellie eagerly followed along, ready for any adventure her big sister proposed. I remember one camping trip when I was 10 and Ellie was 7, we were setting up a tent when it started to rain. Instead of complaining, Stye turned it into a game, pretending the raindrops were fairy tears that we needed to collect in cups to save the fairy kingdom. Ellie was captivated, and even Melissa and I got swept up in Stye's imaginative world. That night, huddled in our tent listening to the rain, Stye spun ghost stories that made us alternate between shivers and giggles. But things began to change when Stye hit middle school. The vibrant, imaginative girl we knew started to withdraw. At first it was subtle. She showed less enthusiasm during our family game nights, often distracted by her phone. Soon she began declining invitations for hiking or camping, preferring to stay home and chat with friends online. I tried to connect with her, asking about her favorite social media apps and even downloading a few in hopes of bonding, but Stye seemed annoyed, rolling her eyes and telling me I was too old to understand. Meanwhile, Ellie continued to thrive. She joined the school science club, eagerly sharing fascinating facts about rocks and plants. She begged us to take her fossil hunting and was ecstatic when we found a small ammonite on one of our trips. The growing divide between the sisters became more evident at family gatherings, where Stye would sit in a corner glued to her phone while Ellie bounced around, engaging with everyone. I tried not to show favoritism, but it was hard not to respond more positively to Ellie's enthusiasm. Last month, Melissa and I began planning a trip to Yellowstone National Park, something we had wanted to do for years. With recent successes at work, we finally had the time and resources to make it happen. We were excited about the prospect of exploring the geothermal features, diverse wildlife, and stunning landscapes. During a family dinner at my parents' house, we discussed our plans, and Ellie's eyes lit up instantly. "Can I come? Please, please, please," she begged. "I want to see Old Faithful, the colorful hot springs, and maybe even a bear from a distance." Meanwhile, Sadie, who was sitting across the table, barely looked up from her phone. The only time she showed interest was to ask if Yellowstone had Wi-Fi. When we explained that connectivity would be limited, especially while camping, she scoffed and said, "Sounds boring." After talking it over with Melissa, we decided Ellie could join us if her parents approved. We thought it would be a fantastic chance for her to experience one of America's most famous national parks and nurture her growing interest in geology. A few days later, I got an upset call from Laura. She accused me of playing favorites and deliberately excluding Sadie from the trip. I was taken aback and explained that we hadn't officially invited either girl. Ellie had simply asked to come, and we agreed. I pointed out that Sati hadn't shown any interest and that her constant phone use wouldn't fit with the nature-focused vacation we had planned. Laura wasn't satisfied with my explanation. She insisted I should have invited both girls, regardless of their interests, and even suggested I was trying to punish Sati for her recent behavior. "You used to have such a special bond with her," Laura said, her voice thick with emotion. "Do you know how much it hurts her to see you connecting with Ellie while she feels left out?" I felt a pang of guilt at her words. Had I really been so obvious in my preference for Ellie's company lately? I tried to explain that it wasn't about favoritism, but about choosing a travel companion who would genuinely enjoy the trip. Sati would be miserable without reliable internet, I argued. She'd just complain the whole time. I'm frustrated that Laura thinks the trip should cater to someone I don't know. She suggested it could help Stye reconnect with nature, but I don't see how. The conversation ended with both of us feeling upset, and when Laura said she was deeply disappointed in me, it stung more than I want to admit. I'm torn. On one hand, I believe this vacation is meant for Melissa and me, not as a babysitting duty for a phone-addicted teenager. We picked Yellowstone for its natural beauty and outdoor activities that Stye hasn't shown interest in lately. On the other hand, I worry that by not including her, I might be pushing her further away. Maybe Laura has a point. This could be an opportunity for Stye to reconnect with her old interests. I also think about the long-term effects on my relationship with Stye and how it might impact the sisters' bond. Will Stye resent Ellie for going without her? Am I unwittingly creating distance in our once close family? Part of me wants to stand firm. Stye is old enough to voice her desire to join us, and I don't want to risk ruining our long-awaited vacation on a whim. But another part of me feels guilty. I remember when she used to cling to me for piggyback rides and hang on my every word. Have I given up too soon on reaching out to her? Changing our plans now would let Ellie down, who's been excited about the trip. It could also lead to a tense atmosphere. I'm really at a loss for what to do. Sure, here's a rewritten version. It would have made for an uncomfortable vacation if Sati joined us unwillingly. Keeping things as they were could create a serious rift in the family. So I turned to Reddit for advice on whether I should have invited her on our family camping trip, despite her apparent disinterest, or if it was reasonable to want to enjoy my vacation without the stress of dealing with a reluctant, phone-addicted teenager. Update. It's been about 2 weeks since my original post, and a lot has happened. I want to thank everyone for their insights. They gave me a lot to think about and led to some important conversations and decisions. After reading the comments, I realized I needed to have an honest talk with Laura about the situation. I invited her over for coffee, feeling both nervous and determined as I waited for her to arrive. When Laura walked in, the tension was palpable. We sat at the kitchen table, the same place where we used to do homework and share secrets as kids. It felt strange to be at odds in such a familiar setting. I began by apologizing for how our last phone conversation ended. I never meant to hurt Sati or make her feel excluded. I admitted that I'd been so focused on the trip that I hadn't considered the bigger picture. Laura's expression softened a bit. "I know you didn't mean to," she said, "but Jake, you have to understand how it looks from our perspective. Sati used to adore you, and now she feels like you've given up on her." As we talked, Laura opened up about the struggles they've been facing with Sati at home. Apparently, Sati's phone addiction has been causing a lot of tension. Laura admitted she and Tom have been arguing about how to handle it. Tom thinks Sati will grow out of it, while Laura wants to set stricter rules. "We feel like we're losing her," Laura confessed, her eyes welling up. "She barely talks to us anymore." Falling behind in school, we were at a loss for what to do until Laura revealed something that changed everything. She had been struggling with anxiety and using her phone as a coping mechanism. This new insight made me see her behavior in a different light, and I felt a pang of guilt for not noticing sooner. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, reaching out to squeeze Laura's hand. "We didn't want to burden anyone," she replied. "Honestly, we felt a bit embarrassed. We thought we'd failed her somehow." As we continued talking, we reminisced about our own teenage years, laughing at how our parents didn't understand our obsession with landline phones and how we'd argue over who got to use the internet. "Remember how Mom and Dad would drag us camping to reconnect with nature?" Laura chuckled. We'd complain the whole way there, but then we'd have a blast. That sparked an idea. After discussing it further, we decided on a compromise. Instead of the planned 2-week Yellowstone trip, we'd split it into 2 shorter ones. The first week would be at Yellowstone with Ellie as originally intended, and for the second week we'd rent a cabin by a lake that had Wi-Fi. We hoped inviting both girls would strike a good balance. I also promised Laura that I'd make more of an effort to connect with Stye on her terms, recognizing that I might have been too quick to judge her interests without trying to understand them. Laura agreed to talk to Tom about setting some reasonable boundaries for Stye's phone use at home. After our conversation, I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. The next step was to talk to Stye. Laura suggested I come over for dinner that evening, giving me a chance to speak with her in person. When I arrived at their house, Stye was predictably on her phone, but when Laura asked her to put it down, while she was out for dinner, I tried to engage Sadie in conversation about her friends and what she had been up to lately. After the meal, I asked if we could talk privately. She looked surprised but agreed, and we headed to the backyard, settling on the old swing set, where I used to push her when she was little. I started by apologizing for not inviting her on the Yellowstone trip. I should have at least asked if you were interested. I'm sorry if I made you feel left out. She shrugged, trying to play it off, but I noticed a flicker of hurt in her eyes. It's whatever, she mumbled. I probably would have been bored anyway. Taking a deep breath, I shared our plans for the upcoming trips. To my surprise, Sati seemed interested in the lake trip. Could I bring a friend? She asked hesitantly. Let me talk to your parents about it, but I think we could work something out for part of the trip, I replied. As we talked, she began to open up. She mentioned watching nature documentaries on her phone and expressed an interest in fishing. Dad keeps saying he'll teach me, but we never find the time, she said. I seized the moment. How about I teach you? We could go to the local park this weekend and practice casting. No pressure, just the basics. Sati considered it for a moment before nodding. Yeah, okay, that might be cool. As I left that evening, I felt cautiously optimistic. It wasn't a complete breakthrough, but it felt like a step in the right direction. I'm hopeful this will help rebuild my relationship with Sati while still enjoying some outdoor time with Ellie. The Yellowstone trip is coming up in a few days, and I'm excited to share that experience with her. I'm really looking forward to our lake trip with both girls. It might not be perfect, but it feels like we're making progress toward a better understanding. I'll update again after we return from Yellowstone and before we head to the lake. Wish us luck. Update: we just got back from Yellowstone with Ellie, and it was an incredible experience. The park was even more breathtaking than I imagined, with its diverse landscapes, vibrant geothermal features, and abundant wildlife. Ellie was such a joy to have along. Her enthusiasm for nature was contagious, and she absorbed information like a sponge. Watching Old Faithful erupt was a highlight for all of us. Ellie timed the eruptions and explained how the pressure builds underground. Her knowledge even impressed a nearby park ranger. One of the most thrilling moments was spotting a grizzly bear from a safe distance. Ellie, who had been reading up on wildlife safety, calmly reminded us of the proper protocols, which was amazing to see in such a real and potentially dangerous situation. We also enjoyed some stargazing, which was incredible due to the lack of light pollution. Ellie kept a detailed journal of all the plants and animals we encountered, often sketching what she saw. Her artistic skills have really improved, and Melissa and I looked forward to her nightly journal time, where she shared her observations from the day. However, the trip wasn't without its challenges. On the third day, Ellie came down with a bad case of poison ivy, leading to an unplanned visit to a nearby urgent care center. Despite the discomfort, she stayed in good spirits and even joked that it was part of the authentic outdoor experience. The incident led to some unexpected bonding time. While Ellie rested in the camper, we played board games and shared stories, reminding me of those rainy days spent together. During our childhood family vacations, I often found myself feeling nostalgic. As we traveled, I couldn't shake the thought of Sati. There were moments when I wished she could see the incredible sights we were experiencing. I even took extra photos and videos, hoping to share them with her later. Throughout the trip, Laura kept me updated on Sati. It seemed she had been asking about our adventures and felt a bit regretful about not joining us. Laura mentioned that Sati had been watching Yellowstone documentaries on her phone, which gave me a glimmer of hope that her interest in nature wasn't entirely gone. Before we left, our fishing trip had gone surprisingly well. Sati had initially struggled with casting and felt frustrated, but once she got the hang of it, her competitive spirit emerged, and she became determined to improve. We didn't catch any fish, but we had some meaningful conversations. Sati opened up about the pressures she felt at school and with her friends, which helped me understand her behavior better. When we returned from Yellowstone, we had a family dinner to share our experiences. To everyone's surprise, Sati asked many questions about the trip and seemed genuinely interested in Ellie's stories. She even asked to see Ellie's nature journal. There was a moment when Sati laughed at one of Ellie's jokes about a particularly smelly hot spring, and I caught a glimpse of the sisterly bond they used to share. Our lake trip is scheduled for next week, and Sati has shown more interest, even asking if we could bring some board games. It seems the time apart has had a positive effect on both girls. Ellie has been eagerly telling Sati about all the things they could do together at the lake. I'm feeling more optimistic about the upcoming trip, but I'm also a bit nervous. I want to ensure both girls feel included and have a great time, so I've been researching some activities to make it special. Here's a revised version. I've planned some activities that should interest both girls, like paddleboarding and sharing stories around the campfire at night. I'm also bringing my old guitar, hoping we can have some sing-alongs like we did when they were younger. One thing I'm especially looking forward to is teaching them how to skip stones on the lake. It's a skill my dad taught Laura and me when we were kids, and I cherish the memories of our friendly competitions to see who could get the most skips. I hope this will create a new shared experience for Stye and Ellie. I've decided to limit my phone use during the trip to set a good example for Stye, showing her it's possible to enjoy life without being constantly connected. Melissa has agreed to do the same, though we'll keep our phones handy for emergencies. As the lake trip approaches, I feel both excited and a bit anxious. I'm eager to spend time with my nieces, but I know it might not all go smoothly. Stye can be unpredictable, and I'm prepared for some potential conflicts or moody moments. Still, I'm committed to making this a positive experience for everyone. I'll update you after the trip to share how it went. Fingers crossed for good weather and good vibes. We're back from the lake trip, and it went better than I ever expected. Both Stye and Ellie seemed to have a great time, and we found a nice balance of activities that everyone enjoyed. The first day was a bit rocky. Stye was quieter than usual and spent a lot of time on her phone. But things changed when I suggested we try fishing from the dock. To my surprise, Stye was the first to grab a rod. She remembered the basics from our practice session and was determined to catch something. After about an hour with no bites, starting to feel frustrated, her line suddenly went taut, and with some encouragement and cheering from Ellie, Stye reeled in a small bass. The look of pride and excitement on her face was priceless. She even asked Ellie to take a picture of her with the fish before we released it back into the lake. That seemed to break the ice. Stye became more engaged in other activities after that. She tried kayaking for the first time and discovered she had a knack for it. We even had a race across the lake, Sadie and Ellie in one kayak and Melissa and me in another. The girls won, mostly because Melissa and I were laughing too hard to paddle effectively. Ellie remained her usual enthusiastic self, but made an effort to include Sadie in her explorations. They collaborated to create a scavenger hunt for Melissa and me, which was a blast. Watching them giggle and whisper as they planned reminded me of how they used to be. Initially, the cabin's weak Wi-Fi caused some grumbling from Stye, but by the second day, she seemed less concerned. We introduced daily phone-free time where we set aside our devices to play board games and tell stories. To my surprise, Stye often reminded us when it was time to put our phones away. One evening, as we sat around the campfire roasting marshmallows, Stye opened up about her anxiety. She shared that social media had been her way to feel connected to friends, but sometimes it made her feel worse. We had a meaningful conversation about finding balance and healthier coping strategies. I shared some of my own experiences with stress and the techniques I've learned to manage it. It felt like a breakthrough in our relationship. The trip wasn't perfect. There were a few rainy days that led to cabin fever, and we had one argument, but overall, it was a wonderful experience. There was a bit of playful competition among the girls over who would get to use the kayak first, but overall, it turned out to be a wonderful experience. On our last night, we had an impromptu talent show. Ellie delivered a comedy routine, Melissa shared geology facts in a rap style, and I played a few songs on my guitar. The highlight, though, was when Stye surprised us with a stand-up paddleboard yoga routine she had been secretly practicing. Watching her balance on the board in the fading sunlight filled me with pride and affection. As we packed up to leave, both girls were already asking when we could return, even brainstorming activities for our next trip, which warmed my heart. Laura called me afterward to thank me for giving the girls this chance. She mentioned that she's noticed a positive change in Stye since the trip. Less phone use and more interest in family activities. Stye even expressed interest in taking kayaking lessons. Reflecting on the trip, I realized I had been too quick to judge Stye based on her recent behavior. This experience helped me reconnect with her and see her in a new light, while also showing her that she can enjoy activities outside her comfort zone. I've learned an important lesson. It's easy to make assumptions about people, especially teenagers, based on their outward behavior. Taking the time to understand and connect can truly make a difference. I'm grateful for the advice I received that encouraged me to find a compromise and engage with both of my nieces. While I know we'll face challenges, after all, Stye is a teenager, I feel like we've turned a corner. I'm looking forward to planning more inclusive family activities and continuing to strengthen my relationships with both Stye and Ellie.